The silent Watchman. My new job was different. Security guard at the old Blackwood Asylum. It had been decommissioned for nearly 40 years, abandoned to the elements and urban legends. A crumbling monument to forgotten suffering. Locals whispered tales of its dark history, of forgotten patients, sadistic treatments, and the echo of screams that never truly faded, clinging to the decaying walls. My shift was the graveyard, from midnight to 8 a.m. Just me and the sprawling, decrepit building, a vast tomb of silence. They needed someone to deter vandals and scavengers, and I needed the money. Simple enough, I thought. A quiet job in a quiet place. The first few nights were uneventful, if unnerving. The asylum was a labyrinth of long, dark corridors, rows of empty, rusting cells, and rooms filled with rusted medical equipment, instruments of a bygone era that hinted at unspeakable procedures. The silence was the most oppressive thing, a heavy, absolute silence that seemed to press in on you, broken only by the occasional scurry of rats in the walls, or the groan of the old pipes, sounding like tortured breaths. My flashlight beam cut through the oppressive darkness, a fragile shield, illuminating peeling wallpaper, broken windows, and the general decay of a place where so much suffering had occurred, where despair had seeped into the very foundations. I'd walk my rounds, check the locks, and try to ignore the unsettling feeling of being watched, a prickling sensation on the back of my neck. Then I started noticing things. Not overtly paranormal at first, just odd. A door I'd sworn I'd locked and double-checked would be slightly ajar on my next round, a sliver of darkness peeking through. A window I'd secured with a makeshift latch would be unlatched, swinging slightly in a non-existent breeze. I attributed it to the building settling, or maybe previous vandals who had found a way in that I hadn't yet discovered, a secret entrance I'd missed. I reported it, but my boss just shrugged, a dismissive gesture, saying it was an old place, things moved, don't worry about it. One night, as I was walking through the ward for disturbed patients, a particularly grim section of the asylum, the air suddenly dropped several degrees, a chilling pocket of cold that seemed to suck the warmth from my bones. My breath plumed in front of me, a visible cloud in the frigid air. I stopped, my flashlight beam sweeping wildly around the empty room, its light dancing across unseen dust motes. There was no wind, no open windows, no logical explanation. Just an icy cold that pierced through my heavy coat, seeping into my very core. And then I heard it. A faint thump, thump, thump. It sounded like a heavy, methodical walk, slow and deliberate, yet impossibly close. My heart began to pound, a frantic drum against my ribs. It was coming from the floor above me. I knew I was alone in the building. There was no one else on staff, no other living soul within these decaying walls. I slowly ascended the main staircase, each creak of the old wood under my boots echoing loudly in the oppressive quiet, amplifying my dread. The thump, thump, thump grew louder, clearer, more distinct. It was definitely a person. A heavy, deliberate stride, unhurried, yet filled with an unnerving purpose. I reached the top floor, the air growing colder with each step, my hand gripping my flashlight like a weapon, its plastic casing slick with sweat. The sounds were coming from the recreational hall at the end of the corridor, a vast, echoing space. I moved cautiously, pressing myself against the flaking plaster wall. My breath held tight in my chest. The hall was massive, with tall, grimy windows looking out onto the overgrown grounds, the moonlight filtering through in fractured beams, painting ghostly patterns on the floor. As I neared the entrance, the thumping stopped. Absolute silence returned, a silence so profound it felt like a physical weight. I took a deep breath, steeling myself, and stepped into the hall, my flashlight beam cutting a path through the gloom. It was empty, or so I thought. My flashlight beam cut across the room, past overturned chairs, a broken piano that looked like a skeletal grin, and then it landed on the far end of the hall. Standing perfectly still, silhouetted against a moonlit window, was a figure. Tall, broad-shouldered, and completely motionless, a sentinel of pure dread. He wore dark coveralls, and I could just make out the glint of something metallic in his hand. No, not metallic. It was too long, too sharp, too distinct. My blood ran cold, a glacial river through my veins. This wasn't a vandal. This wasn't a homeless person seeking shelter. There was an unnerving stillness about him, a predatory patience that spoke of an ancient, unyielding evil. I instinctively knew this wasn't a normal encounter. This was something else entirely. "Hey!" I called out, my voice cracking despite my efforts to sound authoritative, a pathetic squeak in the vast hall. "Who's there? This property is private." The figure didn't move. Not a flicker, not a twitch. It was like looking at a statue carved from pure shadow, an effigy of terror. But then, slowly, meticulously, the figure turned its head, a deliberate, unnerving movement. It was a mask, a white, featureless mask, devoid of expression, yet somehow radiating an ancient, chilling malevolence that seeped into the very air. It was Michael Myers, not the one from the movies, a fictional character, but a horrifying, living embodiment of him, a nightmare made flesh. Then he moved, not quickly, not frantically, but with that same methodical, heavy stride. Thump, thump, thump. He was walking towards me. And that something in his hand, it was a butcher knife. Long, glinting, reflecting the moonlight, its edge seemingly hungry for flesh. Panic seized me, a cold, suffocating wave. I didn't think, I just reacted. My primal instincts took over. I spun on my heel and ran. I ran faster than I ever had in my life, down the long corridor, down the main staircase, my own thumping heart echoing the heavy, relentless footsteps behind me. I didn't dare look back, didn't risk a glance over my shoulder. I could hear him gaining, the relentless, silent pace of his pursuit. He wasn't running, he was just walking. And he was fast. Impossibly so. I burst through the main lobby, gasping for air, my lungs burning, fumbled with the complex lock on the heavy front doors, my hands shaking so violently I almost dropped my keys, their metallic jingle sounding like a death rattle. Finally, the bolt clicked with a loud, satisfying thud. I yanked the door open and sprinted out into the night, not even bothering to lock it behind me. The thought of returning, a horrifying impossibility. I didn't stop until I reached my car. tore the keys from the ignition, jammed them in, and roared the engine to life, the sound a desperate prayer. I drove away, tires squealing, leaving black marks on the asphalt, not even looking in the rearview mirror, terrified of what I might see. I never went back to Blackwood Asylum. I called my boss, quit over the phone, made up some flimsy excuse about a family emergency, my voice shaking uncontrollably. He sounded annoyed, but I didn't care. I still see that white mask in my nightmares, stark against the darkness, the glint of the knife, the relentless, unhurried walk. Sometimes, when I'm alone at night, when the house is silent and the shadows lengthen, I hear a faint thump, thump, thump from somewhere just beyond the edge of hearing, a sound that chills me to the bone. And I remember that he doesn't stop. He just keeps walking, and he never really goes away. He's always out there, a silent watchman of the night, waiting.